man. What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome, Bruin Nation, to another great episode of All Things UCLA Football on the one and only Los Angeles Football Network. As you can see, the man to my right needs no introduction. A Rose Bowl quarterback, UCLA legend, our dear friend, the Silver Fox, and as we discussed last time, the first person to beat USC in back-to-back years, our dear friend Wayne Cook. Wayne, how we doing? Happy holidays, and hope it's been going well the last few weeks.
Jamal, it has been great. As you can, I'm wearing a newish UCLA hoodie. I got some great UCLA. If you see the shoes right behind me, those.
Oh yeah,
I'm almost afraid to wear them. This is some new UCLA gear. So I'm like not only pumped up about that, I'm just excited about, the portal with all of its, and again, I could talk for 3 days on what probably we need to do to tinker with what's happening. It can be very sad, but it can also be very exciting, which I think in the modern era of the world that we live in, I just think, I don't know about you, but I can't stop looking at my phone.
Yeah,
I actually have gotten a little bit of trouble. My wife's like, you're on your phone way too much. And I'm like, because there could be a new transfer coming. And it's just, I have to feel like I'm always updating. So anyway, it's been fun. We had a great holiday in the Cook family. And happy holidays to you as well, man. I hope. When you said, hey, you want to come on the show? Because I sent you a text about all that's going on. You're like, let's do a show. And I'm like, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, always thrilled to have you, Wayne, and so happy it's been a wonderful holiday season. I mean, you said it best, Wayne. It has been a wild ride here these last 20 days. As of this recording is the evening of the 27th. The first window of the portal closes tomorrow, the 28th. And you just look at the landscape here for UCLA, and it's been absolutely remarkable. The number 4 ranked transfer portal class up to now in the entire country. And when you sort of look across it, Wayne, it really feels like we've addressed key positions of need. And there's been a tremendous focus, I think, in kind of 3 position areas, and would love to kind of get your take on each. Really went heavy in the secondary, and we needed to, because obviously lost a lot there. But we're bringing 8 new guys in the secondary. It's absolutely remarkable. And then offensive line, and we've picked up some guys on the O-line that have been to some big-name schools, big-name conferences, and some guys that are kind of coming back home again. And then the defensive line, similar story, some big-name schools and some guys being able to come back home again. So as you sort of take a step back, Wayne, just give me your thoughts on, how did you feel kind of going into portal season, and what's been your assessment, assuming nothing kind of crazy happens in the next 12 to 24 hours? This is sort of that first wave. How are you feeling about this roster?
A lot better. I mean, we'll talk about as we progress. There's still some holes, as we know, but the secondary is gone. And when Davies hit the portal,
right,
we really didn't have anybody left because we brought in some upperclassmen. I thought they ended up improving all year long, which again is what is tricky about the portal. I think sometimes when you put a group of people together and people don't, when you talk about working together with your teammates, it's important. It's one of the things that I worry about with the transfer portal is that, like, the camaraderie, the teamwork, the culture, because position groups need to get used to each other. And secondary matters. I mean, how many times have we watched a game where a corner looks at the safety after the corner, it looks like it's beat deep, and goes, dude, where were you?
Right.
When you play together a lot, and you're in the system a lot, because it's not just playing with your teammates, it's playing with the coaching staff. And so, all of that stuff matters. And I think in the modern era of college football, it's going to get harder and harder and harder, because you're going to have to rebuild every year. This is going to be an entirely new defense. Yeah, we have some players coming back, and what's great is Coach Malloy. A lot of people were worried when the Washington position opened, and Coach Malloy's from Washington. They already have a defensive coordinator. Coach Malloy being around matters a ton. He did a great job last year. Everybody thought we were going to fall off a cliff, and we still had a top 10 rush defense. So, and the secondary got better as the year progressed against a ridiculous schedule. But to bring in all the secondary, and this is where I'm going to make this point very, very clear. I don't know. I'm excited about the numbers. I'm excited about the ranking. I think bringing back Coach Coach Martin from Michigan State to UCLA, he had a good stint here before. I think Coach White being elevated. I think some of the coaches that we've kept, we know, and I don't. Some of the coaches you lose, you go like, dang it, I really like that guy, but sometimes things just need to change. And remember, Coach Foster took this job kind of late in the game last year,
Right.
and so to be able to find the people that he wants matters. So, but then you start looking at edge rushers, which again was a dramatic impact when Femi moved last year. But it took a while, right? It took a little while for that to kick in. Remember, and I'm not going to say his name right, and I don't care anymore because he came and left already, the kid from Miami.
Yeah, Champong.
And,
Yep.
and I really want to, how do I say this correctly? I want to caution people because when we get big-time players from big-time schools, like a player comes from Miami, people are like, well, it's Miami. This guy's 6'5". Well, he didn't play, you guys. When you get a player that transfers or a player that leaves, listen, I like J. Mike a lot, but I just watched Ohio State under Chip Kelly throw the deep ball to Smith like 3 or 4 times in the game I just watched. My whole take on people is if you're really that good, you find a way to get the ball more. When you see splashes, it's like, well, okay, that's great. You want to see a guy that does that every single game, which is why I'd always said that Loya was my guy because every time he plays a lot of minutes, he made plays. Say what you want to say. I don't care about his height or how fast he is. I want to see a guy that makes plays. I mean, those are the guys I like. So to me, it just comes down to, the players that we're bringing in have a chance. The players that whatever their number is, the 88, the 86, the 80, whatever that you have, and maybe a 90 or whatever those numbers even mean. They have to prove it now. So I'm really excited to bring in all of these players. I like the players that were starters. I like the guys that have a lot of minutes. The linebacker from Oregon State,
Yes.
that was a freshman, All-American, like really good player. I like stuff because I already know that we have a couple of other linebackers that I think are really good. So now you bring in a starter, someone that has experience. Remember what Darius Muasau did, but he got better when he was at UCLA. He got better from his first year to his second year. So it's a long-winded answer. I'm very, very excited about all that we brought in on defense because we had to. I'm also excited about some of the guys that we got coming back. Now you mix that in because they already know the system. And it's exciting. We have a chance to be really solid on that side of the ball. But just like last year, you can look at a guy in uniform and you can go, well, why doesn't that guy who came from South Carolina play more? He looks so good in uniform. Well, he's not getting on the field for a reason. Like there's a reason why some guys don't get on the field. So, but then what's great, in my opinion, and what's one of the problems with college football now is our best player from last year, Carson Schlesinger, who's a team MVP. You really worry about a player like that coming out of high school, being a walk-on, staying long enough to prove that he's good. Because in the world of everybody moving around so much and nobody wanting to stick around and being developed, you wonder how many of those stories you're going to have because there's a ton of players that mature late, that get noticed late. Or because coaches can be idiots sometimes, they pay players. Like, I still remember the day I got cut from the Arizona Cardinals. I told Matt Cavanaugh, he knocked on my door, and I knew exactly what happened because it was the last day of cuts. I'm like, yeah, I'm going home now. And he opened the door, and we had a talk, and I really liked him. But I said, I'm better than your second and third string quarterback. And he goes, I know, but we drafted that guy in the 3rd round, and you're a free agent. I go, that's dumb. That's dumb. So just because a guy's on scholarship doesn't mean that you should, or just because you give a guy $900,000 to come to UCLA as a freshman doesn't mean he should play over a guy that's better. Like, that kind of stuff bugs me, and it happens too much in sports. So I hope these guys come in and earn it. I could see what happens. I don't drink coffee all day, people, But sometimes when I'm going to do these shows, I want to wake up a little bit. And I get all hopped up on caffeine, and then I have a million things to say, Jamal, and I'm sorry.
No,
so I'm going to stop there.
This is why we love you. Absolutely.
I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to let you ask me another question. I swear, we didn't even talk about offense. Defense, we got a ton of guys. We got a bunch of the edge rushers we talk about. We got the guy. I don't know how good the guy is from Utah.
Yep, Akana.
But he's coming from a situation where we know they play defense there, and we know for him to be recruited there has to be something. And we also know, I believe, he's Hawaiian, and so there's I think Coach Malloy may have some impact in that world. I talked about Coach Meat, what he's done with the secondary linebackers. Like I really am. I'm very excited. I don't think we're done yet. I think there's more to come on that side of the ball.
Wayne, let me take it in this direction. And please, you have to be you, Wayne. And this is why we love you. Our followers love you. I mean, so you take it anywhere you want to. Let's maybe talk a bit on offensive and defensive line, because this is really a conference that's sort of built from the inside out. It's all about the trenches. A lot of concern there, with how much we lost. Wayne, I looked it up. We lost our top 12 tacklers from last year, right? I mean, just in terms of production. And so now when you look at that defensive line, Wayne, you mentioned Akana coming from Utah. You've got Nico DeVilliers, the kid from Arkansas, who's the starter. Now you're talking about Ashton Sanders, the local kid, 2 years was at OU. He's coming back. So now you got kind of those three. You still have Busic in the rotation. Keanu Williams is going to come back. Gary Smith III is going to come back. And hopefully some other young guys are going to develop. And that's kind of your defensive line rotation. On the offensive side, you got the kid Armella coming from Florida State, Cortland Ford, coming in from Kentucky, Eugene Brooks coming in from Oklahoma. And now hopefully with Yoon and DeGiorgio, that's probably going to be your five with the young guys kind of coming in. Obviously we lost Holstage, lost Carlin. Nicky Prongos going to the portal was really sort of hurt there. But how do you assess sort of offensive line, defensive line with these guys now kind of slotting in? How do you feel about the depth? Do you feel like we need to do more? What are you kind of seeing from these guys relative to the young guys? Just your overall state of the two lines.
Well, I would love to bring in 10 offensive and defensive linemen because that's where you win football games. I mean, but I think what we've done so far, if you look at so let's backtrack and talk about Coach Foster first because I think this matters. I think from day one, he knew that California was important.
Yes.
And it's not only important because what's happening is you start bringing in high school kids from California, especially some of these big-time schools where everybody transfers to. You have that. Then you have players that have left the state to go play for other states. And in the transfer portal, people, let's be honest, my wife and I talk about this all the time as we're driving down to the beach and it's 72 degrees and it's like wintertime. Okay, to go for a walk. You really do miss the weather. I don't care if it's extreme humidity and heat or really, really cold weather. California, those extremes go away. I mean, it's not like it doesn't get hot here, but it's not stupid humidity hot. And it does get cold here, but it's not, in the tens, So people miss that and they miss their families. And so what's happening, some of these players go and they think it's going to be better somewhere else, and then they want to come home. I've always said that UCLA has a huge advantage here. And right now, I don't know what's going on. I know SC's going to play a football game tonight, but they seem to be kind of in disarray, to be honest. And Coach Foster is doing such a good job right now, and he's gone out. I think he's trying to put together a staff that he really wants. I can't emphasize this enough, and I just think I think we heard isn't Bieniemy going to be an analyst with
an offensive analyst with Washington? Yep.
Which is fine, but I really did think we needed a change there. I didn't see that working long term, and I appreciate the fact that Coach Foster made these changes really quickly. Right. He did. I think as soon as that last game ended, the wheels were turning on how can we do what we need to do. And again, you can be friends with people. You can be loyal to people. Remember we talked about Chip Kelly probably being loyal longer than he should have been with some of his assistants. And when he made the right changes, how much of an improvement we made. I don't think Deshaun wanted to wait. I think he's like, listen, we need to put together what I believe is the future that I have. And that's what a good leader does. And I think he's gone out and made some good changes. And then going back to what you were talking about, that includes bringing people home. Like, if you see it, and I do this, I go into the transfer portal, and I've been doing this for years. When I look in the transfer portal at position groups and what we need, I look for that CA next to their name. I don't know if you do that.
Yes.
But I'm like, oh, that kid's from Southern California. I perk up a little bit. I'm like, are we looking there? Especially if it's a guy that's got, like you talked about some of the defensive players, and again, I'm not looking at the list right now, but the guy from Arkansas that was a starter.
Yeah, de Villiers.
Like,
yep.
And again, you play in the SEC, and I'm definitely not going to be that person that says that there's better football players there, because I don't. They're good, they're great, whatever. But there's good football players all over the country. I hope America starts realizing that. Like, we've been brainwashed into thinking that one conference has their teams top to bottom would beat every other team in the country, and it makes me sick. It also makes me sick that the Pac-12 is gone, because I think we're realizing this year. I talk about the same stuff too much, but it makes me sick because we've always played good football, and it bothers me that people didn't appreciate that.
Well, Wayne, just to interject for 5 seconds, I mean, you talk about the Pac-12. The Pac-12 won the Big Ten this year.
Two of the
The
four.
Pac-12 won the Big 12 this year. And the Pac-12 won the Heisman this year.
It makes me so sick to my stomach. And again, I don't always include Colorado in that mix because they hadn't been here long enough, which is probably bad for me because I'm just old enough to where. But yes, you're right. You're right. And the second, by the way, was from people don't pay attention. I do a national podcast, and people don't pay attention to the Mountain West. UNLV, Boise State, whatever. And I'm like, you guys, we do have sports out here, and a lot of really good athletes, and people have just been whatever. So, anyway, going back to the players that we've picked up, it just feels like a lot of those guys are going to have to play. So we're going to have to coach the heck out of them. And again, I think we saw last year what Coach Malloy could do. And by the way, don't anybody out there, I said this last year, and I told you this. I didn't think the defense was going to drop off that much. They did drop off. They weren't as good as they were the year before, but we were still really good. And our numbers would have been even better if we had played Indiana's schedule, for example. It would have been, I mean, look at who we play next year. Well, we have Maryland on the schedule. We have Michigan State on the schedule. Right. We have Northwestern on the schedule. We had none of those last year. We had like all bowl teams except for Hawaii. And I think they won 5 games. So, like, it was crazy, and that defense was really good. But Coach Malloy and his staff did a really, really good job, too. Now we're bringing in all this talent. Some of them are young and some of them are old, too. Don't forget about that because that matters. You have to have players that are willing to come, and they may not start, but they may get quality minutes. And you know what I mean? I would love to be in these conversations because you can't promise everybody a starting job. You can't do that.
Totally.
So you have to tell a freshman or a person that still has 2 or 3 years left that this is going to be a great environment for you. We're going to start winning. And you sell them on this idea that you're going to have every opportunity to play. And again, I love the offensive lineman. I actually think right now, because I was thinking about this today, because all the defensive players that have come in, they saw what we did last year. They saw that we have an All-American linebacker. They saw that we played against big-time opponents and we're pretty good on defense. So that brings recruits in. Right now, UCLA lost their starting quarterback to graduation, their backup quarterback to transfer, and I believe Maryland.
Yes, Maryland.
Maryland
went to Maryland. Yes.
And then so now you're looking at a bunch of young quarterbacks, and they might all be great. They might all not be great. We don't know yet. So what you do right now is if you're a receiver or you're a running back, you might be waiting for that shoe to drop, right? I don't even know if that's the right saying. I don't know why I said
totally.
shoe to
No,
drop.
absolutely. Yeah.
But you're waiting for that, like, okay, now we get the kid from App State. Now we get the Jackson from Indiana. Now, and by the way, I don't know if those things are going to happen, but now we get whatever we get. Then guys are going, okay, I could see that. Now we've got this coordinator. Now we've got – I see the O-lineman that they're putting together because you brought that up, which was huge. To go along and remember, Prongos, I believe, is going to Stanford. Yep. I really did like him, and I liked his potential. I also believe that the system that we ran hurt the O-lineman last year. I just don't. I don't think we didn't utilize. We didn't adjust to the talent that we have, and I think that was a little bit of a struggle. A lot of guys struggled to block 1-on-1, and they got beat a lot. And it just seemed like we did that too much. But when you bring in an offensive line, that's a great place to start because everybody looks better behind a good offensive line.
Totally.
So you bring those guys in, and like you said, Yoon's back, DeGiorgio's back. Remember, DeGiorgio's going to get better. He's going to get healthier. I think Quan, as the offensive line coach, has a youth, and he's going to bring in this. And I think we're going to run a more college-friendly offense. And so I think it's going to help those guys. But Prongos was a left tackle on an offense that struggled, right? On an offensive line that struggled. And again, I'm not saying anything bad. Whenever you hear me say Sturdivant or Prongos or any of these guys, I wish them all the best. I appreciate what they did here. But there's other guys that can play. I mean, I remember before my Rose Bowl year, all these guys left, and it was like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We've got, Maddox is gone, and all these people are gone. Like, what are we going to do? Well, they recruit people below them, too. So, some of those guys can play.
Right.
And when they get every year I run into guys that were, freshmen on the teams that I played on when I was an upperclassman. And we're like, that guy's never going to be any good. And then 4 years later, you're like, ooh. I had one of my centers come up to me, Aaron Gideon. He comes up to me, one of the cases, he goes, Cook, he goes, I never thought you were going to be any good. And I'm like, first of all, stop it. That's a horrible thing to say. But like, you don't know sometimes because they're young.
Right.
And they haven't become who they're going to be yet. Like, it's so I don't even know where I'm going with that. But, like, you got to come in and work for it. And I think these linemen, whether it's the transfers, trust me, Yoon needs to get better. I love Sam Yoon. He needs to get stronger. You're going to go up against some beasts in this conference over the top of you, and you can't get pushed back in the pocket. He's got to get stronger. And I say that with all love because I love the guy. And he had a solid year for his first time playing. But he's got to get better. DeGiorgio, I thought he was better 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Last year he struggled a little bit. And again, system, hurt. I love DeGiorgio. I think he has a chance to be really, really good, and I love that he's back. So, and then the new guys, and they've got to find a way to match. We've got a new offensive line coach I'm very excited about. You do the same thing. We do a deep dive as soon as and you look at background and you look at where he's from and how I'm like, okay, I'm kind of fired up about this hire.
Yes.
So all of that stuff's good. And so we've done a ton, but I still think quarterback, by the way, running back is tricky. Berger he's still around, right?
He's still around. Yes.
So he showed me enough last year.
Yes.
That I really believe that if we blocked for him, I think he has a chance to be really good. So don't act like we don't have it. And remember, we have Cam also from Oaks Christian, who was the scout team offensive player of the year.
Yes.
At running back, and he's a big, solid kid. And again, I have no idea how good he could be. He was a big time recruit. So there are players there. Does that mean that it wouldn't be nice to bring in another established running back and bring in and again, I'm not saying our quarterbacks can't do it. And remember, we have a freshman 4-star coming in at quarterback too from California. But if you bring in, I forget what year the App State guy is. He might have 2 years left. I think Jackson from Indiana's got 2 years left. But for a quarterback, and I know quarterbacks don't want to hear this, if you redshirt, it's going to help you. It really is. And even if you have to sit we saw it with Dante Moore. He needed a redshirt. That was a huge mistake. I think it would have helped him in the future because now he's got to recover from all those he's got bad thoughts in his head now. He's going to be thinking about pick sixes the next time he plays valuable minutes because it's just what he did as a freshman. I see it in the NFL all the time. Iamaleava struggled a little bit, like later on in the year. We saw it happen with the Nebraska quarterback.
Yep.
Raiola. He was a shell of a quarterback that we saw earlier in the year against lesser opponents. Remember, we get all excited when most teams are scheduling teams they can whoop early on. And it just, he looks so amazing. Look at the talent. Look at the sidearm. Look at all this cool stuff he can do. Then they start facing real defenses that, by the way, study you. They learn what your weaknesses are, and you get into conference play, and it's not the same.
Yep.
So I would love to see a quarterback with 1 or 2 years come in and give us a chance to let whichever young quarterbacks, I mean, seriously, if Hasselbeck wins the job, because I am not a person that, and I've been mad about this for a long time now, because I'm convinced that the entire world has brainwashed America into believing that the only quarterbacks that can win in the modern era of college football have to be elite runners. And I just think it's a lie. I went and looked at the last several quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls. And trust me, I know that Patrick Mahomes is mobile. He is not Lamar Jackson.
Right.
He is a thrower, just like Roger Staubach was a million years ago. He was a guy that could make you miss. I mean, you go back and watch highlights of Roger Staubach and tell me that dude wasn't a freak athlete. Watch. I don't care if I'll pick Rose Bowl winners. Watch John Elway when he was young.
Totally. Yeah.
He was an elite runner. Those guys could play in any era. But then you start going back and you see the Matt Staffors of the world. You see a bunch of Tom Brady and Eli Manning and Peyton Manning. And I'm like, come on. You can win at quarterback if you're a good quarterback. I don't care if you can run a 4.2 or a 5.1. If you're a good quarterback, and we could spend years defining that, meaning that like you make first downs. You make the plays when it matters. You make the proper check when it matters. You are a leader of men on the field. There's so many intangibles to play in the position that for all of you out there that think, no, they have to be a certain size. How many big arm quarterbacks fail? A ton of them.
Totally.
A ton of them fail. So how you process defenses, there's like a million things that play into it. So I don't care if it's Hasselbeck. I don't care from anybody on the current staff. If they're better than the guys they bring in, play them. And that's up to the coaches to have a real, honest competition. And by the way, they're all starting fresh because there's going to be a brand new offense this year, which makes it a totally level playing field.
Yeah. No, Wayne, it's such a good point. And, we'll sort of shift because you're sort of leading that way. We're feeling good about the offensive line, defensive line. We've got some depth. You can always do more. Feeling good about the secondary. We've really reloaded there. I mean, the kid Stafford from Miami, sort of reinforces that. So offensive line, defensive line, secondary, I think we're feeling pretty good. If we sort of zoom out to your point, wide receiver is sort of, we're waiting and seeing. But, Wayne, I'm more bullish on the wide receiver room than perhaps most. I mean, we've got Gilmore coming back. We've got Flores coming back. We've got TMA. And then we got Jaden Wilson from the Arkansas transfer. I mean, that's a very deep receiving room. I mean, people don't realize just how deep we were this year. So I think we're in a good spot there. Tight end, obviously we lose Maliki Mataval, but Habermill is coming off of injury. And if we sort of rewind back to 23, there was a real conversation of who was the better player between Habermill and Mataval. So I think we're going to be okay at tight end. I think there's the three questions moving forward from my vantage point. I'd love to get your thoughts. One is you mentioned about the quarterback. It feels wide open. New Sunseri system. We've got Hasselbeck. We've got Luke Duncan, Demarcus Davis, McDaniel. It's wide open right now. You mentioned some names. How are you feeling about that room, and do we need to potentially do more there? How about running back? Berger, to your point, I think is almost a more ideal downhill Big Ten running back than even TJ was. And I love TJ, and I loved our room. But Berger just has that downhill ability that you sort of need in the Big Ten. He's rugged. He sort of always runs over the first guy. And I think we're sort of set up for success there. And then the third position group for me is linebacker. Given that we've lost so much with Kane and with Carson and obviously K. Howe and John, and the list goes on and on. Isaiah Chisholm, the Oregon State kid, I think was a great get, played some really meaningful football last year, 75 tackles, but it feels like we got to reinforce now that linebacker room. So to me, it feels like quarterback, running back, linebacker are kind of the three primary positions that Deshaun maybe needs to focus on in this next transfer portal cycle here in April. But how are you kind of seeing all of the position groups?
Well, and I think the way this whole thing works is that the players have to enter.
Yes.
But the teams can still sign players after Saturday.
Yes.
So there's still a ton of guys that are out there.
Yes.
And as has been pointed out by a lot of people, I mean, I'm not an expert on all this stuff because it's brand new. But the idea that you probably want as many new players, especially on offense, especially with a new system, in before April, right? You want to have them come in for spring practice.
Correct.
And I think so that's why this window is so important. We've got a couple of really big recruits coming in. I believe the App State quarterback, Aguilar, is coming in on tomorrow. I think he's coming in on Saturday. I just read there's a offensive or defensive lineman. I forget which side of the ball, but another player is also coming in soon. I don't know if it's tomorrow.
I think it's D-line. Yep.
D-line, I think it is. And again, can't have enough D tackles if that's what it is. So it's like the idea is that we're still, we're working. I mean, this coaching staff is working hard. I don't know enough about the quarterback. This is going to sound terrible, but if you think about it, who gets the majority of the reps? The starter and the backup. They're both gone. Everybody else, you see a few plays here and there. You see, what they do with scout team or whatever, but it's kind of really hard for me to tell at this point. I will. I promise everybody. I had plenty of limitations as a player, whether it be bad knees, sore arm all the time, and I had a baseball throwing motion at times. So trust me. But I've watched quarterback for a long time, and I want to go back to what I said earlier. I honestly don't care if you have the strongest arm. I don't care because trust me, I've seen a million guys have strong arms. The strong arm kids' problem is they wait. And again, I'm going to put myself in that category. I had a very strong arm. Throwing everything hard is a problem for strong arm quarterbacks. Throwing everything, like waiting for people to be open to throw the ball is and I had to learn this as I grew up. And I used to joke around when I coached high school. I would lob every throw. And I was trying to tell my quarterback something like if a kid would throw an out, I would take instead of taking a normal 5-step drop and throwing it on a line, I would take a 3-step drop and kind of lob it to a spot. Same thing. The ball gets there at the same time. And my point to these guys is you don't have to throw everything a million miles an hour. As a matter of fact, it makes it hard to catch. And so I love watching an NFL quarterback put touch on even something like a slant. And I'm like, that's just beautiful to me because they just put that nice little handle on it. They spin it just right, and they throw it in a way where the receiver can catch it and run. And with so many crossing routes in the modern era of college football, throwing that short crossing route with touch and accuracy is an unbelievable skill. So the speed thing, it's a factor. In college football, even more than the NFL, in my opinion. Being able to run around, it does help. It's being Andrew Luck, right? Being Jane Daniels, you pick any of these quarterbacks that we've watched over the years. If you can take off and get 10 yards, it feels like almost any time you want. It's such a huge. In the NFL, it's harder to outrun guys than it is in college. So it's a huge thing. But also being a quarterback, and again, what Sunseri's bringing in, look at what Curtis Rourke did last year. He's not the most run around. Don't get me wrong. He can move a little bit, but he wanted to get the ball out and be an accurate quarterback that spreads the ball around to his receivers and his talent. There's so many factors that are going to lead into this. Like I talked about being able to read defenses, being able to check to the right place. And again, I don't know Sunseri yet. I don't know how much of an option quarterbacks have to come up to the line of scrimmage and change things. I'm curious because when I played, I had the whole playbook. We all hear modern day quarterbacks talk about when we call this play, there's 2 plays you can check to from that play. And I've always thought that was limiting the quarterbacks. Why not let them have whatever they want, especially if they know the offense really well. But we live in a micromanaging world now, so I get that. But either way, it's important because you don't want to run plays that aren't going to work. I mean, if you're in a pass play, that it's too deep and that play does not work against that coverage, you've probably got a run play or something that is better. So you have to be able to think. So all of this stuff matters to me. And so whoever's going to win the job is going to have to learn the offense first. Because I remember even when I got the job after Maddox left, I knew the offense way better than anybody else on the team. So that was number one. So that helped me win the job. And then, in my humble opinion, I had more talent than they did too. So that helped me win the job too. So those things met, but learning your position matters. All these guys are going to have to be just elite at knowing this offense, and so that matters. And then I'm going to agree with you on the receiving thing. I actually feel really good about the receivers as well. And don't forget, I think Carter Shaw
Yeah.
has a. I'm telling you, he's gangly and tall. He was real skinny when he got to UCLA, but every single time, and again, people, you can. I'm a coach's son, obviously not David Shaw's son, but my dad was a Arizona football player. He was a team captain. He coached my high school team. Being a coach's son matters. You're just raised on. I was watching video of high school teams when I was 5 years old. I would always sneak in and drive the coaches crazy because I had asked questions, and I started learning football at a very young age, and so I think Carter Shaw, when you look at him, he's fast, he's tall, he makes plays, he's a competitor. So I would include him in that mix too of depth. And trust me, I mean, no one's going to say that, when Indiana started the season last year, people probably weren't going, oh, they have Ohio State type talent. But they sure had some players that made a lot of plays. And so I think UCLA's got plenty of talent there as well. And I like what you said about Hudson Habermill. He's one of my favorite guys on the team. He's a total team player. He's a great young man. He's going to probably dominate in life, more than he does in football because he's that awesome. But Hudson is a good tight end too. And he's had to work his tail off for it. And those are typically the type of players that you like because they just keep getting better and better and better. So I also agree with you on Berger. I think when Berger put his foot in the ground,
Yeah.
he had more acceleration upfield than just about anybody. He fought some injuries this year too. I don't think we saw enough of him. So he's got a chance to be really good.
Wayne, I want to double click on something you said earlier in the show, particularly about Deshaun. It feels like there's a sense of decisiveness and a vision to what he wants to do. And I want to sort of ask you a two-part question. For all of Chip Kelly's shortcomings, and sort of we knew all of that, the one thing I think that is inarguable is that he was probably a bit ahead of the curve, ahead of his time from a visionary standpoint when it came to the transfer portal. And so, number one, how much do you think Deshaun has been influenced by Chip in terms of just with the level of aggression and effectiveness in the transfer portal as sort of part A? And then part B, what do you see as moving forward the ideal mix between high school recruiting and transfer portal, and how do you see those two kind of playing together for optimal success at UCLA?
Gosh, that's like the question of give me $1 million and I'll be your GM.
Yeah.
Because, right? That's the difficult thing to figure out because let's be honest, one of the number one things I think about, every time the courts make a ruling, it feels like they're always going to rule in favor of the player. Every time. Forever. And the only way to really stop that is to make this more a professional type league where we actually have rules. Limiting the transfer portal, not, I'm one of those that thinks first time free, second time set out a year, and then graduate you can transfer if you want to. But then the ruling that, your JC years don't count. Wow. High school kids are getting screwed. They really, really are. I mean, if you're a 4 or 5 star, you're going to get recruited. You'll be fine. But it's the 3 stars and Carson Schwessingers of the world. Like those kids are going to have to go a totally different route. And so, especially since now we're going from 120 to 105.
Right.
Right.
I
don't know if everybody's
the window is getting narrower, but the pipeline is growing, right? Outside of high school.
We focus because everybody has to win now. So the way
Right.
to win now, especially if you're a new coach, is to get guys that are already built like college football players. High school kids a lot of times need time to develop, and it sucks to me. And so there's bad. Again, I've said this before, but we live in this era of individualism on steroids, and everybody's like, well, I hope he gets his, and I hope he gets his. Well, how about we get ours at a level that's sustainable,
Right.
and still have pride in our schools and still be, a Bruin for life. And still get to look back on it and go like, what school were you at again? Were you at UCF or were you at Oklahoma or were you at Oregon? Because I know we played together, but I'm not sure where. Let that happen in the NFL. If you're good enough to play there. So I do have, like I said, we can spend a whole other show on that. I think what Chip Kelly did and what I always appreciated is, Latu is his, that's like you can write a book on that story of medically not going to play anymore, played rugby, and he ends up being the first defensive player drafted. That's pretty cool. But turning the Murphys from North Texas into really, really good players. Darius Muasau played at Hawaii, coming to UCLA and being a really, really good player who, like I said, is doing good things in the NFL right now. You bring in some of these players from other schools.
I mean, even Femi, Cal, right? Charbonnet.
And again, Charbonnet was at and I know that Latu was at Washington, but it was the injury thing. Charbonnet was elite coming out of high school. He goes to Michigan, comes back. I mean, his story's a little bit easier to go, yeah, I could see how that guy was going to be good. I think it's the other ones. I think it's some of the other guys that came in from maybe lesser-known schools. And, again, Cal's not an elite football school. So it was really cool how he went out and find guys that fit the culture, too. But remember, Deshaun Foster was on that staff.
Right.
He was in these meetings. He was a part of these discussions. And, again, I'm going to keep emphasizing – I think Deshaun, being a Tustin High School kid, I just played golf with a guy yesterday that I just met. He's a coach at Murrieta Mesa out here. And he looked at me, and he's around Deshaun's age, I think, and he's like, he was so good in high school. He's like, he was a legend. That matters. That stuff matters. I mean, like, this guy came from the environment that a lot of these players are coming from, and you can go onto these schools and talk to these parents and say, listen, I did this. We can make UCLA that place. We can get UCLA back to where we have 70-plus every game, where we have this place rocking, and we have an environment that you're going to get to be able to watch them. You're not going to have to travel all over the country to come see at least half their games. So I think that matters, but I do think I think the people should write their thesis papers on how to balance the high school and the transfer portal, because it's for one, you have to manage the money, because most schools don't have a checkbook that's just like you just pay whatever you want.
Right.
Most schools have to know, and again, this is going to come into play with the quarterback. If we spend, I just read today that, which by the way, the Browns, not the greatest of organizations, but Deshaun Watson is going to restructure that stupid deal that he was given to try to bring in more talent. No doubt. How many times did Tom Brady do that?
Right.
How many times if you really want to win, people, and if you care about something other than if I have $100 million or $150 million, and you actually want to have a legacy that people talk about you not as a guy that was a flop because you were drafted 1 or 2 or 3 and you had a terrible career. Like, if you want to win, you have to have talent around you. I don't care who you are. And so that stuff matters. And same in college. How do you handle how much? And by the way, I know that UCLA is doing a better job with raising money. I'm pretty sure, and again, I'm not an expert on this, although I know some people that could give me the exact answers. But we're doing better. And so there is some more money to spend, but you still have to do it right. If you spend too much on a quarterback, you're not going to be able to put the right people around them. And so that's why I'm excited about all the O linemen and D linemen, because you need depth there. It'd be nice to get all 5-star guys. But again, you only have so much money to spend, so that part of it matters. So high school kids are getting money now too, right?
Absolutely.
So, you go out and you get and remember, this year we saw it. There are 5-star guys that are winning. But would that same, this is going to be where it hurts our heads. Would the same 5-star guy at Purdue win?
Right.
It's tricky. So you have to find the right, like,
context matters. You got to find.
Yes. I can get a guy that's really, really solid. Like, we've seen it where guys are taken from lower Division II. Okay, and they come in and you put them in the right system with the right coaching and with the right formula, and they succeed.
Yeah.
And then then we're like, wow, how did this happen? So you could get the 5-star guy and win, but you can also get that diamond in the rough and put them in the right situation, and you can win that way too. So it just depends on, what and trust me, by the way, the transfer portal, the NIL money that exists, when you win, people are way more likely to want to spend money
Right.
than when you struggle. So that's all part of this factor too. You got to find a way to win so that people are like, okay, I believe in this coach and I believe in this team. We're going to be more willing to write a check than we would have if they won, if we go and win 4 or 5 games again. That matters too.
No, it's such a great point, Wayne, because in some environments, if you have just enough money for one 5-star, but that 5-star is on an island without the right roster, without the right infrastructure, without the right coaching staff, to your point, it doesn't matter who you are, that's not going to be effective versus, okay, one 5-star may equal 3 really good 4-stars, that you sort of put together with the right coaching staff, and your team is much more enhanced. So you have to sort of take that strategic context into account. It's so well said. Wayne, I'll leave you with this. Last question here. We've talked so much about the influx of talent over the last few weeks, rightfully so, with the portal window, and you're spot on. You got to get your work done now, right? The April window is almost like an emergency insurance type of case. You want to be done now, and tomorrow the roster is kind of locked in of who's in the portal, and so you want to be able to make all your transactions as quickly as possible. We've talked a lot about who's coming in. Who is maybe someone who's already on the roster that maybe is flying under the radar that you think is going to break out in 25?
Well, you mentioned linebacker play. And again, I also agree with you on bringing the kid in from Oregon State because of experience. I think that matters. I like Pelot and Woods as linebackers. I think Donnie was looking really, really good before he got hurt this year. So I'm hopeful that he gets to come back. He's one of those players that you notice in practice, and you're like, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but man, he can run, and he just looks like he's got good instincts. So I'm hoping that, and I hope I'm saying his name right, Pelot.
Yeah, Pelot. Yep,
Pelot. I think he has a chance to be a really good football player. So he's one of the players that I'm looking at. I'm curious about Cameron Jones, the running back. I want to see what he can do. I don't know. I love the way he looks. He stood right next to me at the banquet, and I was like, good looking, powerful looking young man who I know had a very good high school career. So again, sometimes we forget that players that do redshirt, I'm a scout team award recipient, and I look back at that year, and I hated every second of it because all of us, every single athlete that played any of the sports, all of these Division I athletes that you see at the college level, every one of us were really, really good in our high schools.
Yeah,
like really, really, really good. Like it's like I played 3 sports, and I felt like some of my friends would tell me I wasn't as good in baseball, maybe, but I felt like I was better in all of them because that's just the way I was wired. And it was just like, and then you go to college, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many good players here because they're being recruited from all over the country. There's always another town with a kid that my dad used to tell me this. There's a Wayne Cook in every town in America. And I was like, whatever, Dad, whatever. But the idea is that knowing that when you get into a bigger world and you realize how much talent is out there, it's incredible because you just realize that you have to work for everything. It's not going to be given to you. That's what scares me about all this transfer stuff, by the way.
Yeah.
Is I think some players don't want to. If you want to go home because you want to go home to California, then you're making the right decision. But if you're just leaving because you think you're not going to have to compete somewhere else, that's kind of a crazy thing. But I like watching the young players. Schlesinger's story last year was amazing to me. I hope that I'm right. I don't know if he's going to wear number 30 next year. I think that was Pelot's number, but I think he has a chance to be really good. I know Matt Stevens, my broadcasting partner, loves Woods as a linebacker also. He's like, we got to get him on the field more. So the idea is that those are 2 players that I think could really help the linebacking core.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Wayne, it's always such a pleasure, Wayne, to have you, your insights, your wisdom, the Silver Fox. Bruin Nation, we got another episode here in the books. Just want to wish all of our viewers, our listeners, our supporters, a wonderful rest of your holiday season. Thank you so much, as always, for the support. and we'll be back in a few days after the new year. And Wayne, you have the red carpet anytime. I'm sure this will be the first of many conversations in the offseason as soon as some big things break. So thank you so much as always, Wayne, and Bruin Nation, as always, 4 is up forever.